So no, like that glorification of criminal lifestyle within the black community in me blows my mind, because we're starting to see young black kids living in the suburbs. I'm not talking about those who live in the projects. I'm not talking about those who live in the hood, but like literally who parents are have money. Yeah. They come from resources, a solid background where they have access to an abundance, and yet they want to emulate this hood lifestyle. We are seeing it at schools. Kids are getting in more fights. I think that's crazy. That's why I always say, how do I say this professionally? Because I keep trying to say it professionally. That lifestyle doesn't have to be the only lifestyle that's emulated.
Yeah.
It's cool to be smart. It's cool to like anime. It's cool to look at other things. It's cool to be an athlete. And if you grow up in poverty and you adapt to your environment, that's cool too. But that over glorification of, that's what I'm trying to say, of violence and guns is too much. It really is. Because now you got people taking that mindset into environments that it don't need to be. You getting in your teacher's face? You getting in your teacher's face? You getting in your principal's face? You getting in the substitute teacher's face? Come on now. Oh, now granted, to be fair, to give it context, everybody, I just created a random scenario. I'm not giving any backstory to it because, yes, can a teacher be disrespectful? Yes, they can. 1,000%. They can definitely be disrespectful. But there are definitely a lot of times these days now where we're seeing that kids are having these emotional responses out of nowhere, and they're kind of lashing out at everybody. You saw the video of the tall Asian kid that knocked the girl out on the desk?
No, what was this?
Oh, man, it came out yesterday. Tall, I believe he's Asian with glasses. He was fighting. He looked really, really tall compared to her, right? The optics of the video, he looked roughly between like 5'11" or 6 feet. She's like 5'5".
Yeah.
He's grabbing at her hair, she's swinging at him, and then he takes her head and slams it onto the desk, and she completely falls out. And they're laughing about it all afterwards, right? Like the guy and the other people in the room. That to me is a problem. That those are these emotional situations that these teens are having, and they're taking that energy and they're releasing it in a negative way. So, yeah.
Well, hence why for quite some time we've been talking about a youth mental health crisis, as in we're seeing a lot of these aggressive behaviors, a lot of these maladaptive behaviors kind of pop up, especially at school, and there isn't the support to really address it. But I also recognize that that is a complex topic, because I think that for particularly young people now, I think this is the first time that young people in the history of youth have had the ability to have access to so many inappropriate things. Inappropriate in the context of being age appropriate.
No, I agree with you on that one. The smartphone is more powerful than the computers we grew up with.
Right? Because like when you and I were kids, like don't get me wrong, when we were our kids, we still have cell phones, flip phones, or the
and
Nokia.
The Sidekick had just came out when we went to college.
Exactly. And we had you had the Nokia phone, the Boost Mobile, whatever. But it was still a case of, in order to get access to the internet, you still had to run into a computer, run to your house, run to the library, run to the school to have access to it. So like we had access to the information, but it was still the fact that like you still had to take extra steps to get to it. Now it's just simply put in your passcode, fingerprint, face recognition, and it's there. And I think a lot of our young people take in a lot of information and they're not getting the proper context, because I don't know if it's because as adults we don't really open ourselves up to them as far as allow them to communicate with us, or if it's a situation of, also what could be a combination of a couple of things, or it could be a combination of, young people don't necessarily know how to express themselves nor feel comfortable really expressing themselves. And they're taking in this information, they're taking in these images, they're taking in these videos and internalizing it in a lot of the wrong ways. Some of those ways being materialism. Mm-hmm. As in, I gotta look this way, I gotta have this, I gotta have that. Don't get me wrong. In the history of teenagers, I don't care what generation you've been, there is that part of the development where it is focusing on materialism. But this particular generation, because again, technology, it just goes to this crazy 10th power of just materialism, as in the shoes have more value than another person, or the coat has more value than another person, right? So it's that materialism phase. But also, as you mentioned, that conflict phase, as in not necessarily knowing how to deal with conflict without it being violence. And then what ends up happening, to your point, because you said this went viral, they see that. They end up going through or scrolling through like their TikTok, their Instagram, and it's just these images of their peers getting violent with other people because someone disrespected them, and that becomes a part of the psyche. That becomes a part of the culture, as in like someone disrespects you, you got to fight. To whereas though prior, when we didn't really have those type of videos, if someone disrespects you, yeah, it could still result in a fight, but it wasn't necessarily a culture of fighting. It was just a case of like, okay, we got an issue. Okay, either we gonna talk this out or we gonna come to blows. But this particular generation, I don't want to lump everyone in together. It just seems like automatically the instinct is I've been disrespected, so therefore, excuse my language, I gotta beat your ass.
You know, it's interesting as you saying that. Like, I don't know where like which is coming first, like the chicken and the egg in this example I'm about to give, but I think a part of it is the media portrayal of black people.
Oh, definitely.
Like, for instance, is it that the powers that be only want to promote one side of the black community, or is it that the black community only wants to consume one side of how we're portrayed, right? Like, for instance, you know who Aaron the plumber is? You don't know who Aaron the plumber is? Oh, he been going viral because of Erica Mena. He was yeah.
Okay.
Like, he out here catching phase like Pokemon. You gotta catch them all. That's his words, not mine. Everybody. He said phase like Pokemon. I gotta catch them all. At one point, all he was doing was catching phase and not plumbing nothing. Until I saw a video of him actually going over plumbing.
Yeah.
And he actually knows a lot about plumbing.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is this. You know, when you say that and people laugh, they smile, and some people actually respect what he's doing. I do as well, because he got the slogan, guns down, hands up. He's trying to reintroduce stop shooting each other and just run the fade. I'm fine with that. I am. I'm really fine with that because there's less people getting killed. But the premise of what's making Aaron viral and popular is he's running fades.
Yeah.
To the exact example you gave. Off of slight or perceived disrespect. He to his point, he consistent. If you slightly disrespect him, he gonna ask you again. And if you repeat yourself or you don't go ahead and make amends to it, the shirt coming off, the hat coming off, the tank top out, and he getting ready to run a fade with you. So that's where I'm saying is like, I can't quite pinpoint which, in that chicken or the egg example of which one it is, but I do think that, like you were saying earlier, that plays a big factor because a lot of times what our teenagers and our young adults are seeing is that there's only one response to disrespect. And I can tell you personally that as a therapist, as I'm getting ready to say this, it actually kind of breaks my heart. The clients that have come to me to try to navigate their anger, to tone it down, have not been black men. I've had white men come to me because they're like, I really want to work on my anger so I can be more calm and docile around my coworkers and my family. I've had females come to me for that, but I've never really had black men come to me about, I want to work on my anger and my response to things. And I'm not saying that black men have an issue, but as a black male therapist, that does worry me because black people, by and large, have had a unique experience in America. You know, James Baldwin's famous quote, please correct me if I'm wrong, to be conscious in America is to be frustrated at all times. Something along those lines or something like that, right? I'm not saying that black people have a problem, but because of that unique experience, I know for a fact that the majority of black people are walking around with some sort of emotional dysregulation issue because you can't deal with generational systemic racism, being denied that it's going on right in your face, having every other race or every other group of people, ethnic group of people tell you that, once you just work hard and do all these other microaggressive things and not feel some type of way about it. And they don't come to therapy to talk about that. I don't know if it's that they don't know that they can, or they might feel like they don't have a problem about it. But to go back to the original point, I do think that to what you were saying, a lot of it is the glorification of one side of our community. And it leads me to a question of, and I'm going to take the other side real quick.
Yeah.
Why is it that black people, do you think that we don't look at or explore or entertain other aspects of our culture? Like, why is one side so glamorized so much.
Well, you really want me to go down the rabbit hole in this one? Okay. So,
I mean, I'll go down it with you. I have my own philosophy as well.
well, here's the thing. When we're talking about portrayals of Black people, I always want to keep it balanced in the sense of, one, Black people do a lot of positive things. It's just that for some reason, those positive things, when we're doing wonderful things in the community, when we are actually de-escalating situations, when we're actually talking about mental health, when we're actually using those skills, those aren't the things that get highlighted. And if they do get highlighted, it get highlighted as like an anomaly, to where as though people are, and understandably so extremely appreciative of it, because it's like, oh yes, thank you, some positivity, some uplift, brothers helping brothers, sisters helping sisters. And that always breaks my heart, because it's a case of like, why can't this be the norm? But I also recognize, to your point, the powers that be, when it comes to Black people, particularly Black men, and we're talking about images, it's always been that of violence, whether we have been the victims of violence in the form of slavery and lynching, or being over-policed, incarcerated, or even killed by the police, or if it's been the narrative that we are the perpetrator of violence to justify the treatment of Black people. And then when you have networks that run with it, or social media that runs with it, then we ourselves kind of internalize that particular experience. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to say that experience does not exist, because it does. Black rage does exist.
Yeah, very much
and sometimes
so.
Black rage, we express it or take it out on each other. But what I am saying is that,
What Aaron Magruder called nigga moments.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, right? So it does exist. But what ends up happening is that I think we, to a certain extent, for lack of a better word, get brainwashed into believing that, like, oh, that's just the norm of Black culture, as in, like, that's a part of the Black experience when it comes to certain things. And I always say, not quite.
Correct.
Like, violence is a part of the Black experience in America. There is no way of getting around that, but not necessarily in the context of like that bullshit Black on Black violence or Black on Black crime, which of course, we can get into that, which of course is a very misleading narrative, right? In the sense of like, oh, well, Black people are more of a threat to other Black people, and it's a case of, and white people are a threat to other white people, and Asian people are a threat to other Asian people, and Spanish speaking people are a threat to other Spanish speaking people. That's not an anomaly. That's just a fact.
Yeah, you're more likely to commit a crime of proximity than a crime of race.
Exactly. Yeah. But the justification when you are a person of color, particularly when you are Black, is like, well, we're going to blow that out of proportion. We're going to say, oh, well, Black on Black crime, that is a very serious problem. What also blows my mind is that, because when they do that, I want to pause and say, so when you guys going to talk about white on white crime, as in white people are more likely to be killed by other white people, mass shootings are more likely to be carried out by white men on other white people. Majority of victims of domestic violence are white women, and their perpetrators are white men. Right?
To your point,
serial killers, I'm not to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Serial killers are more likely to be white men.
Apparently,
killing
America is
white women.
Apparently, America is a unique entity in the category of serial killers.
Exactly.
Apparently,
but you don't hear anyone saying like, well, we have to address this white on white crime, right? We have to address this. This is a serious issue. But they'll say Black on Black crime. And that gets into our psyche too, because then we hear that so much that we ourselves start using the language as in like, we got to stop killing each other. We got to stop. And yes, you're right. We do need to stop killing each other. But we take that narrative, we run with it, and we don't necessarily realize that we're reinforcing some racist BS that was put on us to make it seem like we were problematic. And we're reinforcing in our own communities, and we're running with it as if it's the truth. And then to a certain extent, we kind of, what's that, a self-fulfilling prophecy?
Yep.
We kind of fulfill that prophecy, not necessarily pausing and realize that's not true. And even when you want to look at the statistics, which I know they were like, well, Black people's in the 90s, white people's only in the 80s. You contextualize those numbers. It's also a situation and I know we're in the era now where nobody wants to say powers to be like, well, systemic racism isn't a thing. It's a whole entire thing.
But it's a
whole entire thing.
It's a proven fact.
Exactly.
The only reason that when people debate it, they always go when people look at you and go, point to me where it is, you don't got to point to one specific instance to prove that systemic racism is there. But
It's across the systems.
We do, yes, we actually do have statistical data that shows that, like banking discrimination practices, right? Every time we point that out, like, well, how many people was it? Like, you could what if and tear it apart as much as you want, but to answer your question, you can actually point it to it across the systems and majority of the areas of human life. But go right ahead.
But to your point, you're right, because here's the thing. When people talk about, well, the numbers in the 90s for black people, but it's only in the 80s for white people, it's like, okay, you have to take in consideration redlining. Mm-hmm. You have to also take into consideration the wealth gap, which really impacts black people more than it does anybody as far as like what it is that they obtain in wealth or generational wealth compared to the white counterparts. You have to also take into a history of racism, which everyone seems to want to be like, well, racism isn't a problem anymore. Not necessarily take into account you had 200 plus years of slavery, and then after that you had about 50 to 60 years of Jim Crow. And now all of a sudden, now we've gone from an era of a Civil Rights Act in 1964 to now being 2025. All of a sudden, all those centuries and decades of oppression somehow should have mathematically worked themselves out.
No, I agree with it. And to your point, when you said that the tropes and the stereotypes, Dr. Aaron Wilson, may he rest in peace. He wrote a really good book, The Criminalization of the African American. What's the exact title? I want to say it's the criminalization of the African American community, but don't get me wrong. He talks about, in order to justify the treatment of black people, you have to make it true. Like, meaning you have to reinforce it. So to your point, as far as one depiction of a subset of things, of a situation, right? Yeah. Like black on black crime is ridiculous. It's not a thing, but not in the sense that where they use it, but it's like, yeah, this is a problem. Let's hyper focus on that. See, that's why we treat them that way. Exactly. That is why we do. And to your point, what you said earlier, the power of media is that, yes, after a while, if you keep seeing it long enough, people start to go, well, maybe it is true because it's always on the news. Maybe it is true because it's always this. Until after a while, when you start to look at it and you see something that's different, then it produces cognitive dissonance. Yeah. The way you start putting people in special categories, like I feel like you were alluding to, like, well, yeah, that's one positive thing, which is good, but normally it's all this.
Exactly.
So yeah, I feel like I agree with that context there.
Exactly. It's just so perplexing because the fact that, you know me, we're both big on this as far as critical thinking in the sense of I want all my information and I want it in its proper context, because when again we're talking about criminality amongst black people and particularly how it impacts our youth, it's always a case of, oh well, you know, more crime disproportionately happens amongst black people, and I'm always having to remind people that's not necessarily the case. You guys, first off, you guys are confusing arrest rates with convictions. Correct. Just because someone was arrested, that doesn't mean they committed a crime. Yeah. And number two, it's also just, again, data. It's a fact. Black and brown communities are over policed.
Correct. And the majority of the people forgiven on the Forgiveness Project, the one that, for those who are sent to death row, the majority of the people whose cases get overturned are, in fact, black people as well.
Exactly.
So you're just saying in those moments, which I always love having that conversation with people, is that, to your point, an arrest does not mean a conviction. But what you're actually saying without even realizing is that you're saying that black people are statistically more likely to get arrested. That's it. That's all you're saying.
Exactly.
You don't even give the full context. You don't even know if that's a problem, if that's an issue, if the perpetrator actually committed the crime.
And to your point, which always blows my mind because I didn't realize until I started talking to people, and I want to say this, getting arrested does not mean that you committed a crime.
Correct.
Anybody can be arrested for a variety of infractions. If I decide to go out here and drink a can of Coca-Cola and then throw the can in the street, the police officer could decide to arrest me for littering, especially if there's a sign. And technically one could argue you committed a crime, but let's be honest. If you found that I got arrested for that, you'd be like, okay, yeah, you did break the law, but that's wild, right? So putting things in their proper context, and what always drives me crazy, and particularly in this particular era where there's disinformation very intentionally, misinformation very intentionally, where people, particularly I'll speak for our community, we're not given information in its proper context.
Right. Oh, definitely.
As in, like, we'll have a conversation. You hear people in our community talk about black on black crime or youth crime, particularly amongst black teens, particularly amongst black males, but nobody's having a more robust conversation to contextualize what it is they're seeing. And if you do have a robust conversation about contextualizing somehow or another, and again, we use the terms of mainstream society and even our oppressors, which is like, but at what point does self-accountability come into play here?
Yeah, I think that's absurd. I saw this post the other day where it's like some guy said it's not the government's job to feed your children. It's exactly what the purpose of the government is to ensure the survival of its citizens.
Exactly.
Yes, there's a level of self-accountability. Sure it is. But you're using that in the example you gave to dismiss the nature of the reality for a group of people, right? Mm-hmm. So how do I blend the two together? We pay taxes to a government with the intention that the government is taking said money and doing what's best for its citizens. That's why we have programs, social programs. Definitely we need those, right? And then going back to the other point of what you were saying, because now my thoughts are getting away from me. Dang, how did I end up here? The government program, and then what did you say? Oh, dismissing and saying by accountability. Where do we do self-accountability? You can't say that and then recognize what you were alluding to. Yeah. The disproportion of wealth and opportunities between one community and another. You cannot disenfranchise one community, right? Mm-hmm. And then say, well, y'all need to go pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No, you're negating it, right? Yeah. You're negating it by saying, well, there's a level of self-accountability. Of course there is. Yes. Yeah, I could choose not to do drugs. I could choose not to commit a crime. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you tell me that there is a standard of living, but yet I don't get access to the opportunities that allow me to meet that standard of living, you can't tell me that, well, you just need to work harder. Well, no, I am working hard. They've done studies that shown, and I'll never forget this. There's a study that showed white felons are more likely to get a call back for a job than black people without a felony. Yeah. A white felon is more likely to get a call back than a black man that doesn't have a felon at all. But yet you're telling me that there's a level of self-accountability, but you won't allow me the opportunity and the resources to meet the standard of living, going back to why the government is responsible for feeding your children. I'm paying my taxes. And I'm giving you this money to make sure there's a social safety net to catch me at the bottom, right? Yeah. Therefore, in that regard, if I'm not given the same opportunity as another community to make that standard of living, of course it's the government's job to give me a boost to make it even, to catch me up, to make sure that my family doesn't die off from hunger. So to your point, yeah, like that self-accountability thing, even black people say it sometimes. Like, I hate the phrase, man. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the honest critique. Yeah. I'm not against that. I just don't like placating to when it's like, well, black people just need to do better. What you mean? We are doing better. What are you talking about?
That pisses me off to no end because, one, it completely just negates the very complex experience of what it is to be a black person in America. And not to mention the fact that it feeds into that bullshit of like, well, this is a land where any and everything is possible. That is true to an extent. There's always a caveat. Always a caveat, as in like, well, I was able to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so for every one you that's able to do it, there's like 100 that aren't able to, not even because they're not capable, they don't want it, but because it becomes some sort of a barrier, whether it's economic, whether it's resources, whatever it is. And so when people get into that bag of saying, well, black people need to do better, they need to do X, Y, and Z, I'm always thinking to myself, you do realize that on the other side of this, when it comes to white people, particularly if we're talking about doing better and subsidies and things like that, you do realize that white people are the most subsidized group in this country, right?
I was actually going to say that percentage-wise, like people often talk about it's a larger percentage of black people, but total number-wise, it's actually more white people who get subsidized than it is total number-wise for black people.
And another thing that drives me crazy is you do also realize that...
Which actually speaks to the issue that we keep talking about. Yeah. There's a disenfranchisement going on in one community over the other and an uplifting in one community over the other.
And the thing that also drives me crazy is people don't, and particularly when we're talking about our community, when people talk about, do better, subsidies, I always pause and say, you do realize that tax breaks are subsidies, right?
Yes.
So it's a case of like you're saying to me that like, oh well, black people need to do better. So you should also be saying that to multi-billionaires who get to be able to keep a whole bunch of money, even millionaires, and don't actually have to pay their fair share in regards to taxes and living in these United States of America.
I actually find that topic to be interesting because there are people. You know, the crazy thing about the whole tax thing is that people aren't asking to overtax the rich. They're asking to tax them at the correct rate.
Exactly.
And stop giving breaks.
Exactly.
And there are people out here who live off of government programs who have somehow been indoctrinated into believing that, well, you should just leave their money alone. Like they shouldn't have to pay anything in taxes. And I'm like, what? How did you get here? Because no one's saying overtax them. They're saying tax them to where they're paying equal share. But yet the people who are benefiting from said programs that are funded by taxes will defend, yeah, you don't need to tax them. What are you talking about?
Because
Because without us taxing them,
Yeah.
the program you live off of goes away. And I don't mean that to be funny or anything like that. Like, we're doing this, we're advocating for this to actually help you. Like, we're doing it that you're in the safety net that needs to be there. So it's not like no one's attacking them. It's you can't just keep saying we're going to give them this break, we're going to give them that break, we're going to give them that break. But the working and middle class, which the middle class is going away, by the way.
Yeah.
But the working middle class, y'all gonna have to. We gotta come up with. We gotta cut somewhere to justify this spending. That's where they start cutting social programs at. But for people who defend that, like you don't need to tax them. I think that's crazy to me.
Well, that's put this way, that speaks to capitalism and what it is. Let me rephrase that. There's the perfect idea what how capitalism is supposed to work, right? Which is, okay, someone becomes very wealthy, they make a whole bunch of money, they decide through some sort of altruism that, hey, I'm going to pay people a reasonable wage, a living wage, and all of the money that I'm making is going to trickle down to people to where so they're able to live as comfortably as they possibly can based off of whatever the standards is of that culture, that society. That has never worked in America.
No, not at all.
But we still hold it up as in like, see, capitalism, it is the way, it is how you guys are going to be able to make something out of yourselves and become amazing and rich and successful and all the other jazz and even transcend to the middle class. And the reality of the situation is that's a dream that they're selling to kind of keep you invested in a system to where as though they still can take advantage of you, to where as though, oh, well, you for the few people who do become multi-billionaires, they don't have to pay any taxes. But for you and I and everyone else who's working class, we tax season rolls around, we're like, dang, okay, I owe you a couple of $1,000s. So let me kind of figure out how I'm gonna pay this. But to bring it back to our notes, because I love us, we can go all around the world on these topics. But to bring it back, that's what I mean when I say not having enough robust conversations about these things to contextualize to our kids what it is that they're seeing.
Yeah, oh yeah,
and why they're seeing it, or how all these things play out. Now, granted, I know it's like, oh, that's so boring. No teenager wants to hear that. Of course, if we say it the way that we say it, they're not going to want to listen to it. But these are the conversations we need to be having with our kids at home, but we don't. And our kids, particularly black kids, I hate to say this, they don't get to have just the luxury of just simply just being kids. It's a situation where we have to contextualize for them early on certain things, certain realities, and certain perceptions they're going to have. As in, I'll stand 10 toes down on this one. When you are a young black person, you don't have the luxury of being ignorant.
No,
because being ignorant is the difference between getting locked up. Being ignorant is the difference between falling into poverty. Being ignorant is the difference between being denied opportunities. So you don't really have that luxury. And I think that personally, our generation, who are now parents to either teenagers or younger, I think our generation, to a certain extent, we know this, but for some reason there's a disconnect as far as, are we really having those type of conversations with our kids? Some do, but I don't think enough do. And if they are having it, I feel as though it's not something that's being revisited in a way to where as though it's ingrained in them. Not ingrained them in the sense of causing them some sort of dissidence or causing them some type of trauma or some sort of anxiety, but ingrained in them in the sense of, you live in a country, whether it tells you something completely different, where there's a certain perception of you.
Oh,
And they're
definitely.
going to feed you certain images of yourself, and you have to be hip enough to be critical to look at it and say, like, that may be true for some, but that's not true for all. But a lot of our young people, because they're at that age, with normal youth development, where it's kind of like, I'm not really interested in doing that. I'm more so just kind of interested in being cool and being trendy. And I get that, but again, when
No, to your point, that's a luxury that our community can't afford. Yeah,
you don't.
You can't. That's that different lived experience. You can't afford that. You can't afford to be ignorant about what to do. To your point,
Yeah.
not to cut you off and get right back to you. Like you said, like every black parent and some white parents who have adopted black children or they have a blended family with black kids, we really do got to tell our sons like what to do when you get pulled over.
Yeah.
You get pulled over. What do? You know, don't talk back. Don't say anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or
they might violate your rights and search your car without your consent. You sit down, you do whatever you need to survive that encounter till I get there.
Exactly. And then what makes it even worse is two things I wanted to say. And then what even makes it worse is the fact that even we start policing ourselves because we realize how the white society or the dominant culture, whatever you want to call it, whatever term you want to give to it, we start policing ourselves because we know exactly how they're going to police us. Because one thing, I'm glad it's shifted now.
I hate that too.
I'm glad it's shifted now. But one thing I remember when applying for colleges was for some other from other black people was just like, well, maybe you might not want to consider going to an HBCU. I won't even get into some of the asinine things I would hear people say about going to an HBCU. And unfortunately, even some asinine things that some people still say to this day about HBCUs. But even them policing in that regard, as in like, oh, your degree wouldn't be credible if it came from this particular type of institution, which, excuse my language, call a spade, some wild shit to me. And we'll police ourselves in that regard. Because even still, even once we get our kids out of teenage years into college, and I'll never forget it, I heard it in a college classroom when I was at Old Dominion University, shout out to ODU, where I had a professor who talked about there's a different type of experience when you're a person of color going to college. As in, and this isn't necessarily, and I don't want to lump in all white people. I don't want to do that. But speaking to a certain ilk of white people where it's kind of like, some white people are fortunate enough to go to college because it's been a generational thing to where they have the luxury to come in there to find themselves and have that comfort and to figure out what it is they want to become. Most black people, most brown people, they go to college, or most people who even are immigrants, they don't go to college to find themselves. They go to college to go to the business of getting a degree, to go out there to get the business of actually getting the business, right, and getting a job. So that right there even lets you know those are two different experiences that don't even really get talked about, and then they kind of play out. Because imagine what it'd be like for you and me if it was a situation we were able to go to college. Just like, we're going to college just to find ourselves. Imagine for any of our kids, right? But we don't. We tell our kids when they go to college, like, get your degree so you can go out here and you can get yourself a good job. There's
used to be a good government job.
Exactly.
Right now, not anymore.
I know if you grew up in D.C., it was always like, get yourself a good government job. Now, if you're in D.C. right now, and I feel for my brothers and sisters and everybody else in the federal government, God bless you all, because you guys do phenomenal work, whether people know that or not. That was the thing. That was the golden ticket to where as though. And even asking some of my white friends whom I love, it's like, so what was your experience going to college? And it depends, of course, on the economic status. People with our white peers with some economic status as us, same messaging they got, which was like, okay, go to school, get a degree, get a good job, make some money. But for our more affluent, it was a case of, my path was either already carved out for me in the sense of I had to follow the path of my father or my mother, or my parents gave me, or if you had more liberal parents, they gave me the space like, look, we want you to go to college, get a good, solid secondary education, and just find yourself. I could never fathom my parents saying, I want you to go to college to find yourself, right? And like I said, just to bring it back, it's these nuanced conversations that I feel as though we need to have with our youth, particularly our black youth, that I don't know if because we're so busy, caught up in the grind of just trying to live and take care of our families, that we just don't really seem to have them.
Yeah, I don't think that's a luxury we can have. And as you were saying, LaKeith, look, hey, it just made me realize something. It's on topic, but it's off topic slightly.
I know we be going off topic, but it sounds good.
I'm tired of living in a country where I just can't be. I just can't like go and be and do and try to grow to my best of my ability because of the color of my skin or the background I have. I'm tired of living in a country where capitalism, the almighty dollar, is the end all be all. So people cut corners to maximize profit. I'm sick of that because I can't trust the food I eat. I can't trust the medicine they put on the shelves. I can't trust the water I'm drinking anymore because of how we put it in plastic bottles and things like that, and how the plastic is leaching into the water, but plastic is a cheaper option than anything else, right? Another thing is, so that's one side of the equation. The other thing I'm tired of is that I love being black. I love being African American, but I'm tired of living in a world, and when I say world, I mean a planet where people get mad at my community for demanding equal treatment. I'm actually just sick of all of that. Like, you're mad. And then the thing is that other black people on this planet who come from other countries being mad at black people for demanding equal treatment and then buying into the whole misnomer or drinking the Kool-Aid of, well, y'all just need to work harder. I just want to live in a world, meaning a planet, where I can trust the people who are appointed to certain positions to take care of the community that I come from. Because everything you said, by and large, I receive it and hear it. And it just listening to it, I was processing it, trying to figure out which direction I want to take with it. And the only place I could come to was, I'm just tired of living somewhere where I can't trust that this doctor, this lawyer, this police officer, this president, these government officials, whomever, have my best interest at heart. No, they have their best interest at heart, and they're trying to maximize a profit for whomever, wherever. Yeah, it's just actually sad that we live in I don't know where I was going with that, but make that a real, because I'm tired of all of that.
I think the way you were going to is the collective fatigue that we feel.
No, that's a good phrase for it. It is collective fatigue, because it's one of those things where I know for a fact that we as black people fight generation after generation, decade after decade, to just carve out a slot for ourselves. History is on my side when I say this. When black people carve out something for themselves, it gets torn down, dysregulated, or it gets remixed and rebranded. I just found out about the what was the Freedman's House? That the ambulance system, the EMT system that we have in America was started by black people because the government at the time wouldn't send like law enforcement or EMTs into black neighborhoods. I'm gonna find it and we're gonna talk about it next time. But basically, the EMT and ambulance system was started by black people because black people realized that they weren't sending help into our communities. So they were doing IVs in the fields, things like that. The government came along and said, this is actually a good idea. We need to make this more nationwide. You didn't know that, did you, though?
I did not know that.
Yeah. There's so many things that we don't know. It just gets washed over. And then they'll have the audacity to tell us, well, y'all haven't done anything. Y'all don't work hard enough. Y'all don't do this. Y'all don't do that. There's I believe it's a book called Black People Invented Everything. I encourage everybody to read that book so you can understand exactly what we've contributed, to the overall planet. And society, not even just society, the overall planet. It's just, you're right. Collective fatigue is a real thing because, like you said, our youth don't get the luxury of just going to discover themselves. That's not a thing. You don't get the luxury to just go and discover what you should or want to be. No, there's pressure put on you in high school, which is wild to me. I just turned 18. I'm supposed to already know what my career is supposed to be before I get to college so I can go ahead and study. Come on now. You were just 17 a year ago. Now you're about to go into college and you're supposed to know for a fact computer science.
Well, put it this way.
MBA. Or they tell you this. Major in something that makes money.
I'll put you this way: the things.
Not to cut you off. So now we got black kids who don't want to go explore other things because now they're going to take a job doing accounting and they don't even like math. But yeah, you were destined to go off, and I don't know. But because we don't have what you were saying, that luxury of just going for self-discovery, we don't have that.
To your point about, I coined it, but you articulate so beautifully, the collective fatigue. The way that I rewrite that in my brain for my own mental health is, even though it's exhausting work to be Black, I oftentimes have to tell myself, but we're needed for America. Because Black people, women, people of queer identity, we are the real testers of what America says it's about. America needs us because you say that we're equal, prove it. And when we prove that we're not equal, then we're going to go to bat for it and we're going to fight for it. Granted, it seems to be a case of every time you get a little bit closer, someone just kind of moves the ball, right? And that in itself is exhausting. But even still, it's a situation to where, as though I recognize that even when they move the ball, it's still important for us to be around, for the simple fact that we are the ones that call it out, as in, like, this is crap or this is BS, and then have to do the research and the work to actually prove it. And that's needed, because without Black people, without women, without queer people, without brown people, I don't think America would have a conscience. And America has proven that. America's proven that right now. As in, like, well, we think that Social Security costs too much, so we want to figure out how to get rid of it and privatize it. Oh, okay. And we're letting someone who's the richest man in the world dictate and make that decision. There is no morality in that.
That's ridiculous.
Or we feel as though, like, we shouldn't have to feed kids. There's no morality in that. That's not our responsibility. It should be the parents' responsibility. There's no morality in letting kids starve.
At all.
And people who are sick, well, we should cut back Medicaid because, that's just too expensive. There's no morality in trying to take away people's health benefits so they can live, right?
The reason why we don't have universal programs like universal health care is because it's racism. They've already proven that.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we don't have it. There's enough white people in place that go, I don't want Black people having health care. If they can't afford it, that's on them. Like literally, that's the reason why we don't have a universal healthcare system. That and big pharma and privatized healthcare is a $1 billion industry in and of itself. And so what you said earlier, I could see where you're coming from in that regard. I guess that right now where I'm sitting at in this current moment in time is like, that is a big task for us to have when we didn't ask for it.
Oh, 1,000%.
We didn't even ask to be here, but we're here now. And then that's when people go back to your own country. And I'm like, okay, you can go back to yours. How about we all go back to where we came from, right?
Exactly.
You could do that as well. But the thing is that this is the only home that I know, good, bad, or indifferent. It's the only place I can think of. The only culture that I've ever survived and thrived in is an American culture as a Black person. But to your point, I feel like that is a big task that we didn't ask for, that was thrusted upon us like everything else. Because why do we, as one of the smallest groups of, one of the smallest communities in America, have to be the conscience for everybody else? Like, why do I have to be your conscience? You know right from wrong. You're choosing to engage in these shenanigans. Yeah. Because it's easier to punch down than to punch up in weight class. That's the only reason. Like you can't punch up in weight class, so you kick on people that's in a lower position in yourself as far as they can't fight back. So I think that you're right that there's a lot of people who believe that Black people are the consciousness of America, and I wouldn't disagree with it, but I would also say that we didn't ask to be though. It was thrusted upon us, and that is a big task to put on a group of people.
Look, I 100% agree. 1,000% agree. 1,000%. But you know me, student of history. Our experience is very unique in the history of the world, but it's not unprecedented.
Oh yeah, no.
I often and to that point, because I often think that, like, but why is that burden fall on us? And the answer I always come to is like, if not us, it was going to be somebody else.
No, yeah.
And I also think about it because it goes that therapy training, when we're often helping clients kind of process certain responsibilities that they have to take on, that they don't understand, or certain experiences that were thrust upon them that they didn't really have a say so. Helping them process that and either reframe it or let it go or do whatever they need to do with it. And when I think about all of that, I do the same thing, honestly. And it doesn't remove the fatigue because it's still always going to be there. But what it does do is, in a weird way, it gets me energized when it's time to be energized. But also, what I realize in the history of us and the history of capitalism, I'm also someone that believes that rest is revolutionary. As in, when I am tired, I will rest so I can be energized to get back up and do what needs to be done. But to your point, which I 100% agree with, why do we have to be that? Why does anyone have to be that? And in my mind, it's always a case of dual energies in the universe, right? Mm-hmm. Right, wrong, good, bad, and then of course the gray areas in between. And we're just the ones that got chosen.
Yeah, and when you said that, it's the racism is everywhere, but American racism is a unique entity in and of itself.
American racism is like, if we're talking like brands of cars, America's brand of racism has to be like, ironically, probably like a Tesla.
Yeah, like that's crazy. Like American racism, like racism is everywhere. Slavery is everywhere. You ever notice that in American history, it's huge. It's a uniquely huge situation in and of itself, and that's ridiculous.
Which in turn, because in the work that we do, we understand that, and we understand that whether people are conscious of it or not, that plays a part in our cultural psyche.
Definitely.
It's that ghost that has been haunting our experience that we can't completely exorcise or shake. It's the traumatic experience that we can't just unforget, that we just learn how to live with and manage it every single day.
Yeah, that's why I hate when people say like everything. People often say, and this irritates my spirit. They say, why do black people make everything about race? No, we don't. We have to navigate it every day, though. Yeah. Like, I don't make everything about race. You make everything about race. And it's like, well, I'm not the one bringing it up. No, but you don't got to navigate it. Remember what I said earlier? Yeah. A white felon has been proven to statistically get a callback for a job as opposed to a black person without a felony when they control for experience and everything else in the study. I don't make everything about race. I bring it up because I keep running into that wall all the time. And look at it. Like affirmative action, gone. DEI initiatives, removed. I'm not making it about race. I'm trying to balance the scale, level the playing field. And that's why I always... Everybody, I'm so sorry to say, I'm not sorry to say this. I don't think racism is going anywhere. I don't think it's going anywhere because to have true equality. Okay. I believe that I don't think that all white people are over the top racist.
Correct.
But I believe that that racism exists in everybody, right? Even if you're the most liberal white person, you come from a background of abundance to the point where the abundance is the norm now. And for us, we come from a background of deficits to where it's considered the norm. But let's use that psychologically. At a certain point when you don't view it as abundance and its norm, as I chip away at it, it's going to produce dissonance in you.
Yeah.
Like if I tell you like, hey, you have more than enough on your table, that's not normal. You need to give a portion of it, an equal portion to those who don't have. You're going to resist.
Of course.
You just are. Because at the bare minimum, and I really mean this, everybody, psychologically, if it's not for you, if you have kids, you're definitely going to resist, because you're at that point, you're trying to protect your offspring and your lifeline. If I tell you that what you have is an abundance, but you're so used to it being normal, when I take from you and you have to operate on less, when you're used to operating on more, you're going to fight back because you don't know how to operate on less. The abundance isn't an abundance to you. It's normal. That is why I think at a basic, in that basic definition, it's not going to go anywhere. To balance the scales out means that I have to take your abundance, which you perceive to be the norm. You don't know how to function on that.
Yeah.
Well, you don't know how to operate with less.
Here's the thing. Call it space bait. If we just completely operate off of this idea of this practice of capitalism, racism, sexism, homophobia, none of that stuff is going to go away.
No.
because they are excellent tools to make people less than and to justify why you're not going to pay them more, why you're going to deny them certain resources or accesses to certain things. So to your point, I feel the same way. I feel as though racism is going to go anywhere because and to your point, what makes America so brand of racism so unique is the fact that capitalism has been the driving force of it.
Absolutely, racism and capitalism.
They are married in America.
They
are married.
If you ever look at history books, racism has an intimate relationship with economics.
Yeah.
Across the board, it has an intimate relationship with economics.
And one can argue that economics has driven
Driving
birthed racism.
Correct. It's a driving force behind it. And I'm gonna say this in closing because I know we're at time. There was one thing that was on my there was one thing that was on my mind, and it'll come back. It slipped my mind, little brother.
No, it's okay. But
it will come back. No, it was before that. It was before I said that. It was about abundance and why racism is not going to go anywhere. Anyway, it'll come back to me. But there's an intimate relationship between the two.
Because capitalism will allow you to other human beings. As in other human beings, by that what I mean is this. As in
it came back to me.
As in like they're not the same as us. Right? And then we start feeding into these bullshit narratives. And you can apply it to almost any group, right? As in like, well, early on, before we had before we took science seriously, before we got real critical thinking, well, black people aren't quite really human. There's some sort of like subcategory of human. Or women aren't necessarily smart enough to take on jobs, or their frames are too small to do X, Y, and Z, so we really shouldn't allow them in the workforce. Well, we shouldn't necessarily hire people who identify when we be identified by certain pronouns, because that just throws off the system. How? If someone simply says, I want to be called she, her, why is that such a problem? How does that throw off a system, right? But it's easier for me to turn that into a thing because it's a case of, well, that's one less group that has access to resources. There's one less group that has access to these jobs, one less group that has access to money. Capitalism is a great system, and as far as like being able to create different forms of biases and oppression, and then utilizing it as a justification as to why you can deny certain rights or resources. And it always amazes me that we know this, but we don't necessarily realize how much we feed into it and how much we perpetuate it at all levels, whether you are someone in the 1% or whether you're someone who's in dire poverty. And until we really realize that, and and this is just my opinion, I'm not an economist, I think that the framework of capitalism, not necessarily a bad thing, but I am also one that says like the form of capitalism that we're practicing, trash. It has to be a combination of some other things, which of course, when you start talking about that, then it's like, well, you're talking about we need to do socialism. I said, no, I'm saying capitalism combined with some aspects of socialism ain't a bad thing.
No, I agree with that. I think that the ability to flex power on another human being is a very enticing thing for certain people. I think that if you can oppress another group of people, it's enticing to a certain group of people because of what you just said, right? You know these things and you don't want to change it, like, because you benefit from it. This is what it all comes down to. I know that there's somebody out there that's like, well, no, I don't benefit from it. You do, in a roundabout way. You get the luxury of being. That's what privilege is. But what came back to me was that here soon, America will be a majority of minorities.
Yeah.
And as I look at the landscape, both politically, media-wise, and everything else, I'm always drawn back to what Dr. Cress Wesseling said, that a lot of things are driven by genetic survival. I really do, because what's going on is that we're seeing a re-rampening up of overt racism. Like, everybody's, just so you know, I'm a registered independent voter. I don't trust neither the Democrats or the Republicans, right? I do lean left for the sheer fact that the policies they espouse tend to match my moral code. And also, the black community tends to do better under a Democratic regime versus a Republican regime.
And
right?
that's just fact.
That's just statistically. That's not an opinion.
That's
not
just
an opinion. That is actually fact, that the black community does better under Democratic leadership as opposed to Republican leadership. But I still don't trust neither one of them, because to me, they're the same team different marketing strategy. They just keep the status quo. Dang it, I could tell I'm tired because I lost my train of thought again. What was I talking about before that?
Prior to that, you mentioned Dr. Kress.
Thank you so much. Yes. So when Democrats are in office, it's more covert racism, right? It's, subtle, under the radar things like that. With Donald Trump running for office and getting elected and all these other things, we're seeing a re-ramping up of overt racism. Certain policies, certain things are being stripped and ripped apart and torn down. It does make me think back to Dr. Kress Wrestling's book, The ISIS Papers, where you don't got to be a genius to see that America's turning black and brown. It's just no way around it.
Yeah.
Like the birthing. I've never seen the white community so, encapsulated with birthing rates before. I've never seen it like it has been now.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing, in my opinion, based upon what she wrote in her book, is that they won't have the numbers over time, but true to history, they can get in positions of political, economic, and military power to keep things going in a certain way that benefits them. I can't help but see the parallels between what she talked about in the book and what's playing out in reality, and some of the things that we're talking about right now, that if you're used to an abundance being your norm, you're going to fight to maintain what feels normal to you. I feel like there's enough people that are just complicit with the way that the status quo is, that to what you're saying, like, we all know this, but we don't do anything about it. Yeah, I don't want to do anything about it because it's probably too grand to deal with from my perspective as an individual person, or it ain't that bad because I'm not really, struggling with it. I can't think about how many times we've heard on social media that there were white people telling their black friends or the minority friends, like, I'm sorry he got reelected again. You know why they said I'm sorry? Because they know that it ain't really going to bother them. Well, they thought. Sorry, everybody. I don't want to be disheartening. They thought it wasn't going to bother them. But nah, it's bothering everybody right now.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, that's why I think that that's a part of the factor of, like, why we all notice and we don't do anything about it.
Well, to your point, because I 100% agree with it, to your point, for me what the red flag was to that point? What? When Roe versus Wade was overturned.
Oh, man, that was the beginning of the end.
That whole, because here's my thing.
Because they fought for generations to get rid of that, decades to get rid of that.
50 years.
Yep, and it never happened.
And I put it this way. I will give the Christian nationalists who hijacked the Republican Party, I will give them their flowers because they executed that beautifully.
You know what, Keith? They executed that beautifully. I hate that Christian nationalism infiltrates politics and espouses to be a morality thing, but yet we do.
It's a white supremacist thing.
That's exactly it. Like, literally, you can't say that you're Christian, hijack a whole political party, implement policies in place, but then not espouse all the morality of the Bible. For instance, you don't want to do abortions. Cool. But you don't want to feed children. You don't want to take care of the poor.
Because here's the thing.
You don't want to pull together community resources to make sure that people want for nothing. That was in the book of Acts.
Here's the thing. Christian nationalism really does not have anything to do with Christianity other than some scriptures and some of the rules that govern that particular sect of faith or religion, I should say. Christian nationalism, and I'll say this, look into camera and say this, it is about white supremacy. When they decided they were going to get involved in overturning Roe versus Wade, it wasn't because of a moral thing or morality or God's against it. It was about the fact that we want to be able, the men that are in control of this, to be able to legislate and control how and when white babies are born. That should not be put in a woman's hands. She should not have autonomy to decide that she doesn't want to have a baby when we know that we need more babies. Hence why you have these laws.
Which goes back to what Dr. Kress Wrestling talked about in the ISIS Papers.
Hence why you have laws in certain states like Texas and Missouri that make, excuse my language because it really does make me angry, that makes absolutely no fucking sense that they get voted on, that even get submitted for review, which is, under no circumstances should there be an abortion.
Yeah, that's wild
none.
to me.
Like none. As in, like,
medical wise, rapes, things like that. That's wild to me.
Exactly. But then, of course, you can't just overtly say that, right? Because then it is a case of like, what the hell is wrong with these people? It has to be more covert. We have to put certain writings in there. We have to say something to the effect of, well, we didn't tell doctors they couldn't perform the procedure, but then it takes a judge to say, but the way that you guys wrote the law is so ambiguous to where, so if you guys were to come after a doctor who's performing an abortion because he has to save a mother's life, they could get sued.
That's crazy.
And so when you start seeing policies written like that, it's a case of, this is not a morality thing, because if we're talking about morality, I would imagine that God would be like, well, look, if it's a situation to where as though this baby would not survive, and in the process of not surviving, it will also kill
there's
woman.
Abortions in the Bible. There is. I don't know why we always gloss over that actual passage. It's an actual law that if you believe that this woman's has had this child in infidelity, you give her this tonic, and if the child dies, we know that it was that is literally an abortion.
See, that goes to my point.
But we gloss over that part.
Yeah.
And we go to thou shalt not kill.
Christian nationalism is not about Christianity. Is about weaponizing the biggest faith system or the biggest the religious practice in this country to manipulate people who maybe don't necessarily think about these things critically, to gain control, to dictate to them and dictate to the rest of the country what it is that you want. And me personally, the red flag was, so overturn Roe versus Wade. So pretty much you're just trying to tell women that we need more babies, and particularly we need more white babies.
Yes.
So we're not gonna. It's your body, but it's our choice. So we're not gonna really allow you to actually get abortions, but we can hide it very well by turning it into a morality issue based off of the Bible, based off of Christianity. In my mind, I think to myself, this is not a Christian issue.
Yeah,
and this is
the
insulting.
Weaponization of the Bible always irritates me. The weaponization of a Christian faith is very, very irritating. And to your point, like when you said that your body, my choice, I can't help but think about all those videos on X and other social media platforms where, white men went online and said that. They were like, your body, my choice. I don't like you having that choice. Like this isn't just me making it up. There are people online that have said that.
Exactly.
Like, your body, my choice. You shouldn't have that choice.
And you can easily Google it.
Yeah.
But that
it's
for me,
crazy.
But that for me right there was just kind of like, so this is where we are, as in beyond.
And that single issue voting thing really irritates me. That one issue, you're that gung ho. The devil is always in the details. Everybody, you're willing to negate everything else that's on the chopping block for that one issue. You could look at me and be like, Brian, you would vote for pro-choice against your Christian values.
Yeah.
Yes, I would if it gives me everything else that I'm. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
It is not my job to thrust my faith on you. If you believe like I believe, you were called.
Yeah.
I'm not about to create a world where, yes, this right here is the absolute, we will follow it to the letter. I'm told not to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is I'm going to do what Jesus Christ told me to do. I'm going to formulate a relationship with you. I'm going to introduce you to Christ. I'll answer all your questions, and I'll talk to you. But I'm not going to thrust it on you. Yes, I will do a pro-choice. I'm actually very pro-choice. I'm not pro-life. I don't know. Abortions are a medical necessity. And if you want to do that with your body, that God-given right, because you're not finna tell me what I'm finna do with my body, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm not going to vote on one issue to damn everything else that's on the table. But we are at time. All right, everybody. We hope that you liked this episode. Sorry we went around the mulberry bush there. Tune in 2 weeks for our next episode at Forest Therapeutics with your host, Dr. Brian.
Dr. Keith.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks.